Hello, bonjour. Welcome to the 2023 Map the System Canadian Final. We are excited to share this event with you, celebrating the remarkable work of the Canadian students this year. We would suggest that you use the speaker view for the best experience today. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues, James Stotch, Amy Rintoul, and Cordelia Snodden-Lawley from the Institute for Community Prosperity. We will be your virtual hosts. James is going to be serving as our MC for today's event, and Amy and Cordelia will be supporting teams and guests with tech issues. As a reminder, you'll be able to turn on closed captioning for today's event. You can do this by clicking on the live transcription icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I will now hand the mic over to James for our land acknowledgement.
Thanks, Ashley. Okay. Bonjour. Hello. While we are unable to gather in person, we take every opportunity to acknowledge the land and peoples that make it possible for us to gather and prosper today. Our team is calling in today from Mount Royal University, which is located within the ancestral territory of the 60K CTP, or the Blackfoot Confederacy. The portion of this territory north of the 49th parallel is also where the Blackfoot Nations, the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Arhe Nakota Nations entered into treaty with the Government of Canada. Treaty 7 was signed on September 22nd, 1877. And this area is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Recognizing that people are calling in from all over Turtle Island, we would welcome you to let us know in the chat box the ancestral lands that you are calling in from today. And if you're not sure whose land you currently reside on, check out this great resource that will be available in the chat, nativeland.ca. We give thanks and acknowledgement to the lands, waters, and Indigenous peoples that make it possible for us to gather and to prosper today. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature. We will monitor it throughout today's event and welcome questions of all kinds, as well as encouraging comments to your teams and to other teams. We especially support you sharing words of encouragement. And again, we suggest using speaker view for the best viewing experience. So today's event will be recorded and it will be posted on the Map the System Canada YouTube channel. So please cozy up, grab a drink, get some snacks, tweet your reactions or photos of your virtual setup to @MapTheSystemCAD. At this time, we would like to acknowledge our sponsors and supporters for this year's Canadian Final. The Institute for Community Prosperity is proud to host and manage Map the System Canada Challenge for now a 6th year running. So check out our website. A link will be provided in the chat. And I would also like to acknowledge the support of our programming partner, the Skoll Centre for Social Entrepreneurship at the Saïd Business School, University of Oxford, which hosts and manages the challenge at the international level. Map the System at this Canada-wide level is made possible through financial support from ATCO. The ATCO Group is a one-stop provider of integrated energy, housing, transportation, and infrastructure solutions, with a vision to deliver inspired solutions for a better world. From its roots as a small enterprise called Alberta Trailer Hire in 1947, it has grown to a global company of over 6,000 employees, operating in over 100 countries. Through ATCO's sponsorship of Map the System, we are able to build equity into the program, subsidizing the participation of Canadian teams in the global competition, which is normally charged at a much higher rate, close to £4,000. And the sponsorship allows for the top 4 Canadian teams travel to Oxford to be subsidized, as well as providing financial support to those same teams to enroll in Apprenticing with the Problem. And that's an opportunity to deepen your understanding of your chosen topic over the coming year. I imagine every single person on this call today, whether you are a participant, an educator, someone who has joined just out of sheer curiosity, or to cheer on your team, you're all interested in connecting students to real-life opportunities and make a difference in the world. We all, I imagine, support the notion of students not just as learners, but also as change makers. Map the System tries to build a bridge between these two poles of learning and change making, using a systems thinking approach to deepen students' understanding of an important but a complex social challenge. Unlike a social venture pitch competition or a hackathon or design sprint or a social business plan competition, where students are rewarded for their solution ideas, students in Map the System are celebrated for their in-depth understanding of the challenge, their understanding of what solution efforts are already being tried by other organizations, and their identification of gaps or opportunities for increased or potentially even transformative impact. It is a research-driven competition, but it is also quite different from, say, an honors thesis or from an academic poster or paper competition. Now, maps are all abstractions. They're representations of a complex world involving a series of careful choices about what matters and what's critical to giving an essential overview of the situation and finding our way through the terrain. It is as much about the art of communicating complexity to a world, craving insight to vexingly difficult social and environmental challenges, as it is about excellent interdisciplinary research. So Map the System came to Canada in 2017, and since then, 4 Canadian teams have won the global competition, and many others have participated at that international level. I want to thank all our partnering Canadian institutions, 14 this year from coast to coast. At each institution, there are also a number of dedicated educators, faculty, and staff across the country who lead Map the System on their respective campuses. Running Map the System on a campus is no small undertaking. Being a campus educator requires months of commitment, from advertising the program and recruiting students to recruiting and prepping judges, hosting campus-level finals, and coaching and mentoring teams. So please join me in giving a virtual round of applause to the campus educators who help bring Map the System to life each year. Canada is the only country to host a nationwide final. The success of Canadian teams on the global stage is a reflection of the remarkable education and support students receive from their campus educators and institutions. Across these 14 Canadian institutions, there were over 250 Canadian student teams who participated in Map the System 2023. And it's remarkable that so many students had the passion and tenacity to complete their research, systems, maps, and presentations in what we know is a stressful and anxious time to be a student, and most students do it without formal credit. So it's something on the side of their plate. In April, participating institutions hosted their own campus finals across the country, during which they chose their top team to represent their university or college at the national level. Throughout this past week, all 14 Canadian finalist teams have been engaged in a range of activities, including the semifinals event that took place on Wednesday, and a learning day yesterday, headlined by social entrepreneur and systems leader Larissa Crawford, who's the founder of Future Ancestors Services. After careful consideration, the judges chose the top 6 teams to advance to today's Canadian final. Today, we will be watching and listening to the presentations from these top 6 teams, and the event will close with the announcement of this year's Map the System Canada winning teams. The 4 teams selected today will go on to represent their institutions and Canada in the Map the System Global Final hosted by the University of Oxford in July. Concurrent to this week's Canadian final, teams outside Canada are partaking in a global semifinal. So that's going on as we speak, based out of London, to narrow the field of non-Canadian schools who will travel to Oxford this summer. So during today's event, teams will be presenting live. The presentation is the part of the competition that most mimics a pitch competition, but please note that presentations you see today are only one component of the challenge. The majority of the work teams do goes into the creation of a visual systems map, a supporting 3,000-word written research analysis, and a detailed bibliography. Prior to the presentations today, the judges have read and reviewed each team's written submissions and will base their final decisions on all 4 components. All these submissions from the top teams will be posted for public download on the Map the System Canada website at mapthesystem.ca after the July global final. And by the way, you can go there now and see past year's top teams, going back, I think, 6 years. It's important to consider the tremendous amount of work, learning, and participation in this competition. Each team has spent countless hours researching, conducting interviews, and of course, mapping systems from many different dimensions and perspectives. Judges are responsible for evaluating each team's project holistically and are looking out for the following. First, their application of a systems thinking approach. Second, their understanding of the challenge landscape. What is the nature of the challenge and why is it so stuck? 3, understanding the existing solution effort. So who's out there? NGOs, governments, others trying to deal with this problem. 4, identification of the levers of change and the opportunities for intervention. And finally, key insights and lessons learned from embarking on this process. In the 10-minute presentations, teams are required to demonstrate their understanding of the broader system in which their challenge exists, what are the root causes of the problem, and what might be the elements necessary for transformation. Participants are not asked to provide a solution, but rather to highlight an understanding of the current state of their challenge. And teams should also be able to articulate the new perspective that systems thinking brings to their complex challenge. Any assumptions, systemic patterns, connections, gaps, and potential levers of change that the systems analysis has surfaced. Equally critical to supporting this competition are, of course, the judges. This year, we have a remarkable cohort of judges from across Canada. At this Canadian semifinal, we have a panel of 6 judges who have been working hard to review the 14 finalist submissions over the past week. Deirdre Evans is a faculty member at Nova Scotia Community College. Deirdre instructs aspiring Nova Scotian business students and entrepreneurs, as well as works on provincial initiatives to grow the local economy. She's a management consultant and academic with over 30 years of experience in strategy development, change management, new ventures, marketing, and data analytics. And welcome back, Deirdre. Erin Alexiuk is a research associate at the Waterloo Institute for Social Innovation and Resilience. Erin is a seasoned researcher practitioner with over 10 years of experience working with change makers to catalyze systems change and drive impact across Canada. Most recently, Erin took on the exciting role of Operations Director for the Centre for First Nations Governance, where she plays a key role in ensuring the organization's success. Tamara Connell is the Chief Executive Officer for the Academy for Sustainable Innovation. Tamara is a strong, creative, and entrepreneurial leader with extensive experience across the sustainability and social innovation spheres. She has 20+ years of adult education experience and has designed and delivered courses, programs, and other custom engagements all around the world. Tim Fox is a proud member of the Siksikaitsitapi Blackfoot Confederacy from the Kainai Nation and current Vice President of Indigenous Relations and Equity with the Calgary Foundation. Tim's primary focus is facilitating a systems change approach for reconciliation, decolonization, and racial equity. He co-chairs the Circle on Philanthropy and was recognized as a top 40 under 40 in 2019 for his efforts of mobilizing systems change for reconciliation and racial equity. Tyson Bankert is a community developer. His personal slogan is to edify others, befriend the lonely, and promote justice. How wonderful. A self-proclaimed troublemaker, his intention is to build communities to share power to make change. Currently, Tyson's scope of influence is actively contributing to building community efforts within affordable housing, anti-racism, and climate justice, meanwhile valuing the tenets of communities of care with a bit of play as a resistance. And Vanessa Sun is currently an analyst of economic transformation with the Vancouver Economic Commission. Her main scope of work is to better understand how Vancouver can transform its economy to a greener and more equitable future. She has also been supporting the creation of a space for BIPOC sustainability professionals. After Vanessa and her team won Map the System in 2019 globally, she went on to pursue a master's degree in community and regional planning at the University of British Columbia. Our thanks and gratitude goes to these judges who spent many hours reading submissions and were present in the 3 virtual rooms watching online presentations and contributing their reflections and thoughts for the student teams. So just to recap, the teams that are presenting today are competing for the opportunity to represent Canada in the Global Map the System final hosted by the University of Oxford. Today, the judges will be selecting 4 winning teams. Along with becoming a global finalist, the top 4 teams today will be rewarded with a travel bursary to support their team in traveling to Oxford to attend the in-person Map the System Global Final event. The 4 winning teams will also receive access to the Apprenticing with the Problem grant to deepen their team learning over the coming year. That being said, all 6 teams will walk away with something today, as the runners-up both get a $350 cash prize, and today there will also be an opportunity for you, the audience, to put on a judge's hat and vote for an Audience Choice Award. The Audience Choice winner will be given a $100 donation to the Canadian charity of their choice through Charity Helps, related to a social or environmental challenge. Details about the voting process will be provided later on. Now, let's meet the teams who will be presenting today. First up, we have McGill University, Places We Live, Saving Up Valuable Energy. They'll be followed by Athabasca University, presenting on leaks in the pipeline, barriers to student success in the post-secondary system. University of British Columbia is next, looking at the issue of sexual health education in BC school systems. University of Calgary will be looking at family physician shortage, a Canadian healthcare crisis. Royal Roads University will look at regenerative agriculture and gender equity in Mexico, synergies and dynamics. And Corpus Christi College will be focusing on beyond the bedside, the nursing shortage in British Columbia. Each team will have 10 minutes to present, and in the interest of time, we will follow each with 1 question from one of the judges, keeping in mind that the judges have had much more time to interact and provide feedback to teams directly during Wednesday's semifinals. So to audience members, don't forget to make a note of the submission you like the best. We will have an online poll following the presentations. With that, I will call on the teams to bring up their slides, starting with McGill University.
Hi, everyone. We're really happy to be here. My colleague Julia and I, Louise, are thankful for this opportunity to present our project on the overconsumption of electricity in Montreal's rental housing market. It's a subject that is close to us, places we live. We're both renters and have been negatively impacted by bad housing quality. I'll first touch on the significance of this problem of the inefficiency of our housing stock, and then my colleague will follow explaining the dynamics of change, and he will propose a potential solution. But first of all, it is very important for us to acknowledge that we've conducted this research on the unceded lands of the Mohawk Nation. Chauchage, known as Montreal, is a place that has long been served as a site of meetings and exchange amongst nations. Throughout our project, we found that rental housing was a common thread in 3 big stories: the decarbonization of Canada, the impact of clean energy development, and of course, our living conditions. Canada has the goal to become net zero by 2050, and that will require a lot of clean energy to electrify our economy. But on the other hand, our building stock is inefficient, in particular in Quebec. On that matter, Energy Efficiency Canada Research Center at Carleton University shows in a research that if Quebec was to retrofit its entire building stock, we would be able to put 10 million electric vehicles on the road, not only in the province, but also elsewhere in Canada. So Quebec could play a key role in Canada's decarbonization. But even though if in the past the province had an excess of electricity, it's no longer the case. Especially in the winter when everyone heats their homes, there's such a high demand that Hydro-Québec needs to import energy from neighboring jurisdictions with most likely third-year grids, increasing our domestic emissions. So in the context of a growing demand of clean electricity, like we will see with the decarbonization of our economies, it put high pressure and strain on Hydro-Québec to expand its production and also its network. But in the past, building more capacity also meant displacing Indigenous and rural communities, disrupting their way of living and damaging the local ecosystem. To repeat those settler colonial development pattern is unacceptable, knowing that in Quebec, In Montreal, households use 35% more energy than Finnish household, even if the climate in Quebec is very similar to Finland, and it's even sunnier in Quebec. There's another number that I want you to keep in mind, is that 80% of dwellings in 2050 already exist. So when we think about the future of our housing stock, its expansion is quite marginal compared to what we have now. And what we have now is mainly the rental market. In Montreal, out of the 4 million people living there, 60% of people are renters. And even if the average age of building is 45 years old, most of renters, 3/4 of them live in homes built before 1980. So that means older are even way, way older than 45 years old. And typically also mean more repair. And in this time, buildings were built with no consideration of energy efficiency. And the tragedy is that renters are not able to improve the building characteristic of their dwellings. The only thing they can do is change their behaviors, but behaviors only respond to active and passive systems that are deficient. The passive system is what is fixed in a building, so how much a wall is insulated, how much a roof is insulated. The active system is about the ventilation, how air circulate in rooms, how heat is distributed from what kind of heating devices. Things a renter can change, hence amplifying the complexity for this market segment to reduce its electricity demand.
And in fact, when we really think about who's concerned the most about this issue, we first think of renters. And I've been one in a home that was basically freezing solid because the ground was too close and my landlord wouldn't do anything about it. And that kind of brings up that landlords ultimately have control over building characteristics. And that's true once the property is built, but at time of construction, the agency really lies with the municipal governments that end up granting or not granting approval for construction or renovation plans. But they do grant that approval really through a building code that sets out the requirements that a plan needs to meet. And that code emerges from a negotiation between the federal and provincial governments, who negotiate the feasible and the best practices depending on the locality. So that's really how these faraway governments actually have influence over the housing stock in Canada, and more precisely in Quebec and Montreal. There's of course other ways that these governments can have impacts on the housing stock, usually through the purse and subsidies that they grant to property owners. But in Quebec, those can look like Nouveau Climat, that targets new buildings, or Réno Climat, that targets existing buildings. But governments obviously do other stuff. They try to track energy consumption through labeling programs that they standardized over Canada. EnerGuide in Canada is one thing developed by the Natural Resources Ministry. The other things that they do might be ad campaign. Hydro-Quebec has many ad campaigns over the decades that target people's behaviors in their homes. And there's other institutions that actually care about how people use energy in their homes, like Quebec's Natural Resource Ministry. However, what we find is that there's a gap in how effective all these measures really are. And they really come from 5 specific things. The first is fragmentation of programs. So across jurisdictions, the timelines, the processes might be different. And what that does is it's really hard to navigate as a property owner or as somebody that's the target of those programs to actually implement and participate and benefit from those programs. The other issue is that the building code really is only relevant for new construction. And to give you an idea of what we mean by this is for a lot of buildings, the code was last updated in 2015, but it only took effect in 2021 for new buildings. And before that update, everything was built to a code devised in the 80s. In 1987, that's when the previous version was set. And so the last 40 years of construction really are built to the 80s standard, not today's standard, which is much more climate and energy conscious. And the third big issue is the misalignment of incentives. So we've touched on renters not being able to control their housing characteristics, but really when it comes down to it, it's because renters end up benefiting from landlords improving housing, but landlords are the ones paying the price. And so the costs and the benefits don't accrue in the right account for change to happen with just subsidies being paid to the property. The other 2 issues are really logistics. The construction industry may not be ready, doesn't have the labor or the ability to train as much on the new technologies, and it's very fragmented, so it's not also easy to have any effect on. while the housing stock simply isn't very well known. A lot of the information that we present today was through multiple proxies and different databases that we found, but it's ultimately quite unclear for a government what and how to implement policies that have an effect at the right things for the right people and in the right regions. And that's ultimately why we come to a proposal that is to mandate retrofits. And there is a mechanism for that to happen through the Quebec's building regulator, the Régie du Bâtiment du Québec, which can mandate current code compliance for existing buildings, which totally changes the proactivity of the measure. And the reason why we went to a constraining code is that they've worked elsewhere. In the UK and Denmark, renovations have to be accompanied by home and energy efficiency improvements in order to be approved. In BC, there's a quite promising step code that leads to gradual tightening of the energy efficiency requirements for any kind of major renovations. And we felt like there was a need for a new rule because electricity prices in Quebec don't really drive change the way that they would elsewhere, but they're quite high. And the way to do that mechanistically is to actually add energy efficiency audits to property evaluations, because municipalities can visit properties to assess whether or not major work has been conducted. And we're conscious that doing that has a lot of considerations, and this is sort of a simplification of what we have in our visual systems map, but it's ultimately that we recognize that setting a rate of renovation might drive up housing value, rents, and hence decrease housing affordability. But we think that if it's done at scale, there's a potential for that effect to be moderated by savings to experience and the streamlining of subsidies in a whole portfolio of solutions approach that the government could take. And even if it might seem drastic, we really think this is something that we have to do now, because there's no real pathway for Canada to achieve its greenhouse gas emissions targets that doesn't pass through deep and widespread energy efficiency improvements. And we have a closing window of opportunity for climate safety, so we think we should grasp the opportunity while we have it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise and Julien. Amazing, brilliant policy analysis and tackling the Venn between two very complex systems of housing and the energy transition. So we have one question from Tamara.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, team. That was a really great work that you put into the report and the maps that you prepared, and an excellent, clear presentation today. My question for you is probably can be shared by the both of you, but I'm just curious to know, you came into this work, you probably had some assumptions, and I'd be curious to know what of your assumptions held true after you had done your analysis, and what assumptions have changed, or have where have you learned something that maybe was you had misassumed previously?
Thank you for your question. It's a really great question. Do you want to start and I'll follow?
Yeah. I mean, I'm an engineer by training, so I came to this thinking that the answer would really be technological, and I think in a lot of ways that's what we struggled with, because I was really pushing, oh yeah, but there's the technology angle, when in fact Quebec has most of its housing is already electrified. It's not gas like elsewhere, and so what we think might work elsewhere has to be always qualified when we bring it back to the Quebec system. And so I would say that it's really looking at how those decisions are made in the process of research that challenged my view that maybe it was a question of just having the right programs or adding things, when it might just be really a stroke of a pen that changes the way that the system moves along. So that's I would say the assumption that I had coming in that was quite challenged by the research effort.
Yes, on my hand, I think because we both had bad experience as renters, I was really focused on landlords at first. And we kind of discovered that landlords, and especially in Montreal, most of landlords are, we call mom and pop landlords, small owners that do not have the right knowledge, do not have also money saved up to undertake these retrofits. So hence, really the governments and the multiple government level needs really to coordinate program, and like we said, streamline program to really target those small and pop owners and give them the right knowledge, because yeah, it's something we on the ground, we kind of found out people just have no idea what retrofits are, and what technology are available for them.
Great.
Thank you so
for those
much,
reflections.
Louise and Julianne and Tamara as well. And thank you for being brave enough to go first. So the next up is Athabasca University. Go ahead and load your slides and start when ready.
Can you see that?
Yes, looks great.
Awesome. So welcome, my name is Karen Fletcher and I'm from Athabasca University. Over the past 3 years, I've had the immense privilege of getting to represent my fellow students through our Students' Union and getting to advocate on their behalf. And in hearing their stories and in working with administration to solve them, I've had a front row seat to see the types of problems that force students out of university, as well as the types of solutions that can help them succeed. AU is an open online university, so anyone is welcome. You don't even have to have graduated high school, and we're able to study asynchronously at our own pace. So we end up being the university for students that can't attend other universities. Sometimes that's because of work or illness or disability or caregiving commitments, but we're kind of a hodgepodge of different experiences. And I found that the post-secondary system is complicated. There are a lot of moving parts with hidden connections. And this project examines the student experience, in particular, what forces students out of university, focusing on the barriers and the relationships between them. I want a post-secondary system where any student, regardless of their life circumstances, has the resources and support to succeed at university. And that's the lens or the North Star used throughout my map and project. I'm a non-traditional student. I'm older and I have children, but I also have a lot of support as I study. And there have been a lot of times over the last number of years that I've reflected that the reasons I'm able to succeed, such as childcare during an exam or being lent extra books, are because of my privilege rather than because the system is set up to support students. And I want a system where student success isn't a function of their privilege. I began by mapping the different parts of the system, and as expected, there was a lot going on. All the map elements have additional details provided in the notes on Kumu if you're interested. I found 3 major structural elements of the map. Clusters, which are thematically connected groups of elements, they're color-coded here. Loops and nodes, which are elements that tend to fork a student's journey into multiple loops. So you enter in one loop, but you leave in 2. Your life gets more complicated. Those are indicated by diamonds on the map. And initially, I expected that the loops would stay within clusters, but I found that wasn't a case. Instead, there was an abundance of different loops, and most of them crossed clusters. When I got to the point where I felt the map represented the system, I thought to myself, this isn't a map, it's a mess. So I said, okay, does that mean I've gotten too complicated? Is the fact that there's so much going on here an indication I need to narrow down my focus? But as I reflected, I came to the conclusion that the complexity of the map reflects the great truth of the system, which is that the biggest problems students face are connected to the fact that the different subsystems of the post-secondary landscape often don't work well together. For example, we could have a student with learning disabilities who needs a diagnosis to access accessibility services, but assessments cost thousands of dollars and there are long and unpredictable wait lists. Financial aid will only consider assessments done in the last 6 months. So if the appointment comes up at the wrong time of year, sometimes students can't afford it. The borders between those clusters, in this case, financial aid and accessibility, are the cracks that the students fall into. And narrowing my focus to one subsystem would ignore that big structural issue. Right now, a lot of the solutions focus on elements in one cluster. So for example, with our student with learning disabilities, the student is experiencing problems with accessibility and financial aid, but the solutions focus on accessibility or financial aid, which ignores intersectionality and the compounding impact of experiencing both of these problems simultaneously. There are a number of qualities that a successful intervention to this system are going to have. First of all, the solutions have to work across different clusters and break down silos. Secondly, successful interventions are going to have to simplify processes. Using the solution has to be less work than continuing to deal with the problem. And thirdly, solutions require us to assess if the problems we're looking at are actual problems or a result of an inflexible reliance on conventions? If a student can absolutely learn Calculus 1 in 7 months, but can't do it in a 4-month semester, is there space for them to do that? Or do we force students out because they can't fit in a 4-month box? I've identified 5 key changes that could be put in place to address key issues. First, some students self-select out of using accessibility services because of how difficult it is to get the right documentation. One person described it as if someone looked at the symptoms of ADHD and made a very specific obstacle course. Redirecting the funding already in the system for diagnosis to create a psychologist positions at universities or colleges to provide in-house diagnosis would drastically reduce the workload in getting the right documentation, which would allow the students to access the resources, accommodations, and financial aid services already in the system that they need to succeed. Secondly, proactively and explicitly teaching academia's unwritten rules in seminars and mentorship programs evens the playing field and provides connections students can use to build their future. Mentorship programs especially benefit first-generation students who don't have their own network necessarily to ask about academic norms, like what are office hours, should I go to them, and what do I do when I'm there? There is an absolute brilliant nonprofit based out of Scotland called My Academic Family that has both mentorship programs and seminars they call Athabasca University that does this and sees fantastic results in the students they support. Next, needs-based aid is an efficient way to distribute help, but only if we're accurately assessing need. Reevaluating how we assess need in student financial aid for students with different family structures and situations would allow us to decenter the concept of a nuclear family, which would support many students who are currently excluded from the system. Currently, our ways of defining need are based on colonial and patriarchal assumptions about what families and obligations look like. So if you're supporting your grandparents, they might not be considered a dependent. And so your financial aid isn't adjusted to accommodate that. Similarly, married students are often unable to qualify for financial aid because of their spouse's income, even if the couple doesn't share finances. And that includes common law couples, so people who haven't even decided to get married. Excluding students from funding because their families look different is wrong, but it's also something we can fix. Next, replacing academic probation with supportive streams that offer academic and mental health support would support students who struggle academically and address the causes of those struggles rather than the one last chance and you're out model of academic probation we have, which currently increases the pressure the students under, but doesn't address their situation. And finally, post-secondary systems should have flexible learning streams to complement their in-person programs, or they could partner with institutions that do in order to prevent students from falling through the cracks. One of my favorite things about Athabasca University is the flexibility. Students have the option to extend our courses if we're facing a crisis or if we can learn the material, but not in that 4 or 6 month block. We can study around our shift work or our medical appointments or caregiving opportunities. Something I've heard from our students over and over in the last number of years, and something that's true of me as well, is this is the only way I could get a degree. And I want everyone, regardless of whether they need that flexibility permanently or temporarily, to be able to access it because that gets students across that grad stage at the end. So we began by looking at the map, which was complicated, bit of a mess. What would a map look like if we were to apply these solutions? In this copy of the map, I've colored the connections and elements that would be addressed by these interventions black, so you can see them. And this is what the map looks like if we remove those items. Now, this isn't a binary and problems are not solved in one go, but this shows us that there's a lot of areas of the map and connections we can untangle. In this copy, the top left and diagonal is a lot more open than it was before. There's still a lot going on, but I'm a believer that faced with the problem, we shouldn't be discouraged with the fact that we can't fix it all at once. Despite the fact that the post-secondary system is complicated, there are interventions that can make it better. And while using these levers absolutely won't fix the entire thing, they can make significant improvements and get us closer to have a post-secondary system that works for everyone. Thank you.
Karen, thank you so much. Boy, there's so much of what you said that will resonate with many, many people on this call. So thank you for that. Lots to chew on. And I should just mention Athabasca is basically a virtual university.
Yep.
Students from across the country, and you're based in Ottawa, right?
Yeah, we have students in every single federal riding.
Amazing. So we're going to go to Deirdre for a question.
First of all, Karen, I'd just like to say thank you. That was an amazing presentation and really eye-opening for me. I teach at Nova Scotia Community College, and so I take a lot of what you're speaking to into my own practice, and it's caused me a lot of reflection. So thank you for that. My question, I like to focus a lot of my questions often on the applying the understanding of what existing solutions exist today in other jurisdictions. So you spoke a little bit about, I think it was My Academic University model in Scotland. My Academic Family, and how they bring that in through sort of the mentorship models into practice to help students, because I think that peer aspect is really great. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that and how that fits into your map.
Sure. So one of the things I noticed in the map is that there were a lot of gaps relating to not knowing how to do things, like not knowing what the norms are, not knowing, like I mentioned office hours, but like, are you supposed to go to those extra lunches? Are you always supposed to be early? Are you supposed to dress a certain way? Are you supposed to build a relationship with your professors? And how do you do that? And students who don't know those things, often because of a lack of knowledge, not because they don't want to, end up getting punished. They get into loops where they're not the one that gets the letter of recommendation, or they're not the one that's told about that opportunity. My Academic Family, I mentioned they have two different streams. One is a general mentorship program where they pair, I think you have to have graduated. It might include upper year students though, but successful students with students who are first generation, and they define first generation as people who do not have a parent that has graduated university in the UK. So someone who might have family, but with a different set of academic norms are able to apply, or someone who isn't in contact with their family who have graduated. So for example, if someone was disowned because their family was bigoted for a variety of reasons, they would still be able to qualify even if their parents did graduate. And they have that mentorship program to make sure that this person has someone to be like, you don't know what you don't know, but I'm going to tell you something important. And they also have how to university seminars. And I got to go to one, and it was stuff like, this is what you should wear on a campus visit. Like the thing where you're like, I don't have anyone to ask this. And it was really interesting because at AU, we have, I think around 70% of our students are first generation. So as the student union, supporting those students was a major priority of us. But sometimes it's difficult to figure out how to do that. So I really appreciated getting to look at what they were doing. And as a result, we ended up having the university's first orientation night, because we have rolling enrollment, which makes orientation awkward. But we were like, we're going to do it, and had a bunch of like, this is a registrar, this is how to AU. And we're able to rope in the provost to introduce some students to how to AU.
Excellent. That's a really great explanation, and nice to see that example being put into practice. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for presenting, and Deirdre as well. Next, we have University of British Columbia. So we'll give you a second to set it up and to start when ready.
Good afternoon, judges, fellow participants, and audience members. My name is Jenna, and this is Brianna and Gabby. Today, we will be presenting our systematic analysis of sexual health education in BC school systems. For this project, we conducted a thorough literature review of academic journals and media articles and examined provincial curriculum documents. We also conducted 2 interviews with BC-based certified sexual health educators, as well as conducted an anonymous survey with 101 responses from people over 18 years old that had graduated from a BC high school. In the BC Adolescent Health Survey, out of nearly 30,000 students aged 12 to 19, over 15,000 did not know where to get tested for an STI.
Nearly half of students did not know where to acquire birth control.
And about 16,000 students did not know where to obtain emergency contraception. Clearly, comprehensive sexual health education is not being adequately delivered to BC students. Every student has the right to this education, and these rights are not being upheld. The federal and provincial government are responsible for ensuring all BC students have access to comprehensive sexual health education. But what is comprehensive sexual health education? We will abbreviate this as CSC, which is a curriculum-based process of teaching and learning about the various aspects of sexuality. It aims to equip children and young people with knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that will empower them to develop respectful social and sexual relationships, consider how their choices affect their own well-being and that of others, and understand their rights throughout their lives. Every student has the right to make their own decisions regarding their sexual health given their beliefs and values. However, because CSC is a human right, it is paramount that it is delivered to all students.
Schools play a key role in being an institution that provides CSE. Since education falls under provincial or territorial jurisdiction, the extent and quality of sexual education varies between provinces. In BC, sexual health falls under the physical and health education curriculum. And since PE is mandatory until grade 10, sexual health education stops then. In addition, the sexual health curriculum was recently redesigned. And although the content outlined is comprehensive, it is broad and open to interpretation by teachers. This gave teachers more autonomy when delivering lessons. However, many teachers are not provided with training on how to deliver CSC. They have flexibility in choosing what is covered and can gloss over topics they don't feel comfortable teaching, an issue further perpetuated by the fact that there is no monitoring or regular evaluation of CSE. Therefore, the CSE that students receive can depend on their school district, school, and teacher. Our survey found that the frequency of delivery varied greatly, with almost half of respondents indicating that it was only delivered every few years.
The challenge we have focused on is the delivery of CSE in BC school systems. Within the system, there are various stakeholders with intersecting relationships that can influence how a student receives CSE. These include a student's family, local community, school community, especially teachers, as well as the provincial government, federal government, and non-governmental organizations. Later on, we will elaborate on how specific stakeholders can play a role in improving the delivery of CSE.
We identified 4 main root causes that lead to substandard delivery of CSE in schools. These create reinforcing feedback loops within the system. Let's zoom into this map and examine each root cause. The first root cause is the lack of teacher training. BC updated its curriculum recently, and it has been deemed excellent by sexual health educators. However, the delivery is dependent on the level of comfort of the individual teaching. Essentially, the quality of CSE received by youth is dependent on the capacity, comfort, and values of the teacher and school community.
The second root cause we have identified is socioeconomic barriers. Teachers and counselors typically deliver CSE in schools. However, some schools choose to hire independent sexual health educators who are professionally certified. This outsourcing of CSE is specific to schools located in more affluent neighborhoods, resulting in only a fraction of students receiving accurate CSE from a qualified educator. The third root cause is the lack of resources in rural areas. Centers in urban areas generally have more specialized teacher training and sexual health educators and services, meaning that youth in rural areas often have the most limited access to youth-friendly sexual health services.
The fourth root cause is the stigmatization of sexual health. There is shame and discomfort surrounding the topic of sexuality, which can prevent teachers, students, and other adults from engaging in conversations regarding sexual health. There's also a social component to the stigmatization of sexual health, where youth fear for their reputation among peers and family members. The broad impacts of CSE delivery can be sorted into 2 categories: improved knowledge of sexual health and an increase in skill development and attitudes regarding sexuality. For example, CSE has been shown to lead to outcomes such as delayed initiation of intercourse, reduced risk-taking, reduced number of partners, increased condom use, and increased contraceptive use. Additionally, CSE informs individuals about their rights, the rights of others, and to be inclusive of all sexual and gender identities.
On this slide, we've outlined the non-governmental current solutions, including those on an international, national, provincial, and online scale.
Organizations such as Plan International, Action Canada, CCAN, and Options for Sexual Health all advocate for and offer resources to support sexual health. But these solutions are not enough to guarantee CSE for all students in BC. So, who has the power to make change? Although stakeholder collaboration is important for change to occur, the provincial government has the ability to cross the first bridge to create change in the system. Since the education curriculum falls under provincial jurisdiction, the responsibility of improving CSE for all students primarily falls on the BC government. The government has the ability to implement training programs, monitoring, and evaluation of CSE in schools to further understand the changes that need to be made to guarantee this right for every student.
The first gap we have identified is the lack of training and resources for teachers to effectively deliver the CSE curriculum. The provincial government must acknowledge that teachers have varying ranges of familiarity and comfort with CSE, and that delivery requires training, especially given the stigma surrounding it. An intervention is to allocate funding to implement a standardized teacher training program to ensure that the level of CSE delivered is of the same high standard across the province. This will allow teachers to deliver CSE in a way in which their own personal beliefs and biases do not influence their lessons.
The second gap is that there is no monitoring or evaluation to ensure CSE delivery is standardized across the province. Since the provincial and federal government are obligated to uphold and maintain the right to obtaining CSE, they should collaborate and implement monitoring and evaluation standards of the CSE being delivered. The provincial government should collaborate with non-governmental organizations, such as the McCreary Society, who hosts the BC Adolescent Health Survey, to regularly collect data and feedback from both students and teachers about the delivery of CSE and to monitor whether sexual health learning objectives are being met.
Also, there's a lack of local resources for youth living in rural communities, which creates barriers for students to receive CSE. The importance of local-based services in supporting CSE delivery must be acknowledged, and it must be understood that there's great disparity between the sexual health resources in rural and urban areas. It is crucial for comprehensive, inclusive, and easily accessible resources to be provided for youth in addition to increasing funding, so that there are more sexual health educators and sexual health clinics in rural regions.
Lastly, there is shame and stigma surrounding CSE. All stakeholders involved must acknowledge and respect that every individual has their own beliefs, values, and levels of comfort regarding sexual education. The provincial government should provide teachers and parents with the resources not only to teach CSE, but also to understand its importance and relevance in youth. Ensuring that teachers and the broader school community enforce a policy of not tolerating any discrimination or bullying towards students can help to make sexual health a more comfortable conversation and promote inclusivity.
Throughout our research, we learned that it is the delivery, not the curriculum, that is the key determinant of how CSE is taught in schools. The challenges of CSE delivery intersect with social, governmental, and education sectors and reflect how differences in socioeconomic status, local community resources, and stigmatization affect the quality of CSE received. CSE is a human right, meaning all students have the right to receive this important education. In order to ensure all BC students have access to CSE, meaningful stakeholder collaboration is necessary to create the resources to train teachers, monitor what is being taught to students, and reduce stigma and shame surrounding sexual health. With changes to the system, we hope that the reinforcing loop of shame and lack of knowledge is broken in order for future generations of British Columbians to be educated about sexual health. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Rihanna, Jenna, and Gabby. And the siren in the background just added to the urgency of your topic. So really well done. We have a question from Erin.
Hi there. First of all, thank you so much for the time and energy that you've spent on this important topic. It's of critical importance. So I wanted to thank you and acknowledge the work that you've put in. There's a quote that I often turn to when engaging with students, and it's that if research doesn't change you, you're not doing it right. And I think that that's especially true in systems research. I'm particularly interested in your interviews. And I was hoping you could tell me about your experience conducting interviews with those who are in the field, who are living this system every day. Perhaps you could expand a bit on whether or not learning from their perspective influenced your thinking and how.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for the great question, Erin. I can get us started. We conducted 2 interviews with BC sexual health educators. One of the ones that really stood out to us was Kristen Gilbert, who leads education at Options for Sexual Health. And Rana and I actually had the privilege of being her students. She teaches a class at UBC called Human Sexual Health. And I think for us, especially having that opportunity to receive CSE from that teaching perspective really kind of influenced and opened our eyes to how important this education was. And I think hearing her perspective, and as an educator who has, leads a nonprofit organization who often does that outsourcing and comes into schools to deliver that presentation, really opened our eyes to some of those barriers that exist where only some schools can afford to hire, for example, Kristen to come into their school and talk. Rana and Gabby?
I'll just add to it. So personally, I went to a school in an urban area, and going to school, I had the opportunity of being given sexual health education through outsourcing. However, this education that was given to students in my school, it was only given once throughout my whole high school experience. And until I took Nursing 280 with Kristen Gilbert, I didn't realize how important this education was and that it should be delivered not once throughout high school, but every single year, and not just in high school, throughout kindergarten all the way till grade 12. So she just really inspired me to learn more about this topic. And I really enjoyed learning all we could through our interviews and also through our surveys that we also conducted throughout our research. And yeah, if I want to pass it on to Gabby, if she wants to add anything.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add that I thought it was really valuable to conduct interviews with 2 educators, especially because a lot of the resources that we found online weren't as up to date as we had hoped. And so both of them gave us some really valuable insight that we weren't able to find online, given just the lack of information and the date that we were able to find in our resources.
Thank you so much. And congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So next up, we have University of Calgary. I'll give you a moment to set up and you can begin when ready.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is Winston and I'm a family medicine resident at the University of Calgary. On our team, we have Tina, a practicing pharmacist and PharmD student, and Brandon, a health researcher. Today, we're going to talk about a crisis that affects everyone in Canada, the family physician shortage. This is something that I see every day. I see overflowing emergency rooms and long waits to see a family doctor. Tina talks to 2 to 3 patients a day at the pharmacy who don't have a family doctor anymore, or who are unable to see their family doctor, and they're asking for an assessment or a medication renewal. It's not just us. It's all over the news. 6 million Canadians don't have a family doctor, and it's going to get worse, with a predicted shortage of 30,000 doctors in the next 5 years. Now, I want you to meet Carla. Her family doctor just retired, and she's trying to find a new family doctor. However, the wait is over 4 months long. She's one of the 1 in 6 Canadians without a family doctor. If she needs medical care, these are her options. She can seek alternative health care, see someone with a more limited scope for practice, forego healthcare by self-diagnosing or asking friends and family, or go to one of the overburdened acute care centers. In fact, in Alberta, she could be one of the 46% of patients who went to the ER because she couldn't see another doctor in time. In Canada, patients are waiting 4 hours at the emergency room to see an emergency doctor, and up to 40 hours to be admitted to hospital if they need it. Each visit costs the government $300, which is 6 times more than what a family doctor visit would cost. And that's without the follow-up a family doctor could provide. In fact, patients have died while waiting in the emergency room. Now, from our research, there are 4 groups of stakeholders. And as a patient, Carla is one of them. Although she's one of the most affected by the doctor shortage, she has the least power. But with advocacy groups or appealing to the media, patient voices can be better heard. Meanwhile, healthcare professionals have more influence than patients with the family doctor shortage. But these individual professionals can sometimes feel like a cog in the system, limited by healthcare institution policies and regulatory bodies. Another important stakeholder is the education system that trains future family doctors. Although medical students are able to choose what type of doctor they become, they're influenced by the teachers who taught them and the institutions that both recruited them and taught them. Lastly, government sets policies that fund and regulate healthcare, with most of the power centered around provincial and national governments. Now, what's happening to Carla is just what we see on the surface, with these long waits to get a family doctor and more emergency room visits and a lack of access to medicine. What's beneath these events are patterns. These are patterns of excessive physician workload, expectations, causing burnout, and a setting of ever-increasing patient complexity. Beneath that are structures of governments that insufficiently fund and support family doctors. This places increased administrative burdens on general practitioners. Family doctors are choosing to adapt by specializing, and family medicine and medical students are avoiding family medicine. At the heart of it all are deep-rooted beliefs that family doctors are not as important as specialists, that doctors are overpaid, that we can't change the healthcare system, that we can't change and train more doctors, that we should see a doctor in a timely manner, even though we fund acute care centers more than we do any preventative health measures. Now, these brings us to our root causes. So why are we seeing a shortage in family doctors? Well, we've identified 5 root causes that decrease family physician supply and increase patient demand. And we're going to zoom in on the top 3 causes. The first is lack of funding. Lack of funding for medical trainees directly reduces the amount of family doctors trained in family medicine. Meanwhile, a lack of funding for administrative support increases the burden placed upon family doctors, resulting in burnout and a decreased interest in family medicine. Imagine if our public education system was structured where teachers needed to start their own schools and we paid them per student, per lesson. This is how family doctors are currently being paid in Canada. There's also a lack of interest in family medicine. In addition to the previously mentioned burnout and lack of administrative support, there's a perceived lack of respect. Family medicine is the lowest paid medical specialty. In addition, many family resident training spots are located in rural and French-speaking areas where medical students choose not to live. This results in decreased access to primary care, especially in those areas. With an aging population, a lack of health promotion, and increasing health inequalities, patients are becoming more complex. Complex patients require more medical care to address their issues, which further increases the workload among family doctors. This leads to a loop where complex patients causes increased workload that decreases job satisfaction, which further leads to a lack of family doctors, which leads to a decreased access to primary care, further increasing the complexity of patients. Now, there are many solutions that exist already to this issue. At the local level, many towns have incorporated allied health professionals into primary care. For example, in Thessalon, Ontario, we have nurse practitioner-led primary care clinics. Meanwhile, in Lethbridge, Alberta, we have pharmacists that can prescribe in these pharmacist-led clinics that can treat patients in the primary care setting. However, these solutions are few and far between and not enough to address the current shortage of primary care. On the provincial level, there are programs that encourage physicians to practice rurally, but that's met with limited success. For example, the Rural Education Supplement in Alberta has only attracted 1 doctor to practice rurally. At the national level, technology such as Prescribe-It is effective at reducing the administrative workload of family doctors. But new technologies that are more AI focused, such as the Arcturix and Augmetics, needs further research and regulation before implementation to the clinic. In addition, programs facilitating foreign trained doctors to practice are still falling short. In BC, only 200 doctors were recruited, even though in the next 5 years, we're estimating a shortage of 30,000 family doctors. Other countries have had similar difficulties recruiting doctors from foreign trained countries. For example, in the UK, they've recruited 124 doctors out of a target of 2,000 doctors. Now, between the root causes and existing solutions are several gaps, namely an inadequate increase in funding, and undesirable residency locations for family doctors, and health and social inequities. However, all these gaps are potential levers of change. We should increase funding for medical trainees. An example of a successful program is a targeted enhancement recruitment scheme in the UK. We should change the compensation model for family physicians. And an example of something that worked was the longitudinal family physician program that was recently launched in British Columbia. This compensates doctors not only for the number of visits they have, but for the time spent per patient, the number of patients under their care, and the complexity of their patients. We should encourage residents to work in French-speaking and rural areas by enrolling more medical students from those areas. An example of a system that works well would be Northern Ontario School of Medicine's preference for students in rural communities. Finally, we like to stress the importance of addressing inequities and social determinants of health. If all these changes can be made, hopefully we can see a different Carla. Instead of waiting 4 months to find a new family doctor, hopefully she can see one in 2 weeks and no longer be one of the 6 million Canadians without a family doctor. Thank you, and I would invite any questions.
Thank you, Winston, Brandon, and Tina. What a timely issue, and you would have no shortage of interested audiences for this presentation, I can guarantee you. Okay, we're going to go to Vanessa for a question.
Yes, thank you all for a great presentation, especially since this topic has become probably more of a frontline news with COVID happening and everyone really being concerned about our healthcare economy. I'm just curious to better understand through your research what the relationship is between the federal and provincial government in providing the funding and training, and if there's any coordination that is currently happening.
Yeah, so the current healthcare system, the provincial governments are in charge of coordinating like all the hospitals, how doctors are paid and whatnot. There's also colleges that regulate what their scope of practices for each healthcare professionals are. The federal government does fund these provincial governments and also pay for a few specialized populations like Indigenous and people in charge of national defense. And they also help out with agencies such as the Public Health Agency of Canada, and Health Canada helps set national regulations for these.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Winston, Brandon, and Tina. And next up, we have Royal Roads University. So we'll give you a minute to just get set up.
Welcome, everyone. We'll be presenting our research work on the topic of regenerative agriculture and gender equity in Mexico, synergies and dynamics. My name is Geoffrey, and I'm joined by Alejandra and Catherine, and we are graduate students at the Royal Roads University. All three of us come from different countries, in fact, countries from different continents. And while we were brainstorming to come up with a topic, we found some common challenges, that is climate change and gender inequality. All three of us have experienced these challenges directly or indirectly in our lives. In this presentation, we bring the challenge of gender inequity and climate change that threatens the Mexican communities. In the last decade, no matter the efforts that many sectors have made, both hurdles have just increased in size and damage. Our research problem falls under three main domains, that is environmental, social, and governance. The broader question that we ask is, how Mexican society intervene in these complex challenges and address the challenges while creating dynamics for respecting and dignifying nature and women for the benefit of all society. Mexico is facing the impact of climate change, with decreasing yields and lower quality production due to erratic rainfall patterns has resulted into water scarcity and depletion of water reserves in northern Mexico. The traditional agricultural practices are resource intensive and have not been able to provide the expected returns in some areas, leading to people, mostly men, migrating to other cities and countries in search of better economic opportunities. The image here shows how the current traditional practices and increased temperature in Mexico has led to drought conditions in more than 80% of the agricultural lands. This demands investment in modern and sustainable agriculture practices, better infrastructure and services, and creating economic opportunities in all the areas.
The second main area of our analysis is Mexican gender inequity in agricultural industry. And to understand it, we focused our attention in the context, the role, and the potential of women farmers. The context: Mexican society rests on a patriarchal system that is rooted in education, cultural expressions, economic activities, and legal and political institutions. In 1974, Mexican women achieved legal equality. However, misogyny and male privilege continue to permeate plenty of aspects of Mexican society, such as unequal or non-existent educative opportunities. There are systemic and systematic women human rights violations across the country, and there are family property traditions that do not promote that women own the land that they work, no matter the legal system. Another relevant element of the context is globalization. Since the beginning of the 90s, multiple transnational companies arrived to the country, and many of them degraded the ecosystem. So it threatened the access of women and families to land and water. So the consequences have been women and families displacement, reinforcement of women's vulnerability, and increasing of women and children global trafficking for prostitution and forced labor. So seeing the situation, the government decided to militarize the country, but unfortunately, it just replicated the system itself. And now there is an escalated women's security crisis, strictly connected to gender violence and global organized crime that unfortunately, in many cases, is supported by government corruption. So in that context, the dynamics of the system are degradation of the environment, displacement, migration, and destruction of the social fabric. So women have been forced to defend their territories, families, and integrity by themselves. So that's the hurdle, that's their role, and this is the potential. Although women own under 30% of land in Mexico, they represent more than 50% of the workforce of a $46.6 billion industry, which is 13 times the US agricultural industry.
The stakeholders in our analysis include Mexican government, farmers affected by climate change, women affected by gender inequality, public-private partnerships for economic support, non-profits for policy advocacy, the international community for financial and technical assistance, climate events impacting agriculture, and the local ecosystem providing essential goods and services to the local communities. We mapped the system and identified 32 elements, out of which 8 elements fall within the environmental, 10 within social, and 13 elements fall within the governance categories. The system's map shows the multiple interconnections between agricultural production and women participation in Mexico. Elements such as agriculture production, women participation, regenerative agriculture came out with high centrality values in the system. The land degradation, traditional agriculture, climate change, and deforestation negatively impact the agriculture production in Mexico, while household responsibilities, current land policies, systemic discrimination, and patriarchal system negatively impact the women participation in agriculture sector. In addition to this, corruption and organized crime add another layer of complexity and enhance the negative behavior of the system. Our research also identified that with the promotion of regenerative practices, we can improve the agriculture production, and also by imparting training in regenerative agriculture to women, we can improve the participation of women in the agriculture sector.
We identified 5 levers of change that have the potential to improve the system behavior. We will explain each of them in the following slides, but first it's important to understand that these levers of change are deeply interconnected and should be addressed in a collective way. And in fact, as part of our research, we conclude that due to the complexity of the system, isolated interventions will have limited or no effects. So the first level of change and the most challenging one is the change of social cultural mindset. In this diagram, we represent a potential transformation. In one side, we have the current condition of the system that is nourished by a patriarchal mindset and inequity. And we can see the outcomes of these elements. They produce a systemic discrimination and women exploitation and exacerbates unfair working conditions that limit opportunities itself. If we nourish the system with an equity approach, we can shift the patterns of exploitation to recognition and empowerment. This is a key point of intervention that has a big potential to change the system behavior. The next levers of change are improving land ownership policies and protection against crime. In the current system, the lack of right over the land and organized crime nourishes the security crisis, exacerbating unfavorable working conditions, and at the same time produces displacement, forced migration, with an imminent destruction of the social structure. But if we nourish the system with an efficient gender-based policies and rule of law, those will be the key intervention points. We can improve the system behavior. On one side, improving land ownership with a gender approach is key to women's empowerment and financial security, because if they own the land, they will access to credit and resources to work. Therefore, their families will also benefit. On the other side, ensuring protection against organized crime with a gender approach is critical to change the current violent context in Mexico, where women are a vulnerable population. The fourth level of change is imparting training and education in regenerative agriculture for women. Since women play a crucial role in agriculture in Mexico, if we nourish the system with training, education, and investment in sustainable practices, there is a potential to improve core yields, of course, but also to increase resilience to climate change and community. An example of a successful case study is a cornfield in Chiapas, a state of Mexico. This farm tripled its yield by changing from conventional agricultural methods to regenerative agricultural practices. The fifth level of change is multi-institutional collaboration. In the current context, women suffer a social marginalization, but if we nourish the system with public and private partnership, stakeholder engagement to develop gender-sensitive investments, we can improve the agricultural supply chain while providing training and education. And as a result, we will have better production rates, of course, but also we can generate social awareness and capacity building to reduce this gender gap.
Finally, we understand Mexico has tremendous environmental and social challenges, and even with the current system's dynamics, we believe that it can be transformed into opportunities. This transformation should be the mission for the entire community and the government, and more importantly, men will have a crucial role to play in this. We believe men should be part of this movement and be the enablers and agents of change to promote and empower women and empower the land to release their full potential. On behalf of the team, I thank everyone. Thank you.
Joffrey, Catherine, and Alejandra, thank you so much. Your images are stunning and really fit your focus on regenerative agriculture and gender beautifully. We have a question from Tyson.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciated learning a lot more about these complexities. I'm wondering if there are any particular programs or initiatives or like that are trying to answer some of these current questions that you have presented to us, whether that's like from international support, current Mexican government trying to support some of the ways in which you've all identified are important pieces to repairing the cracks in the system.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, there are a lot. in all levels. For example, the government have implemented plenty of reforms in terms of the legal regulations, but still we need more about that. In terms of agricultural and regenerative agriculture, we have also interesting projects that private sector implemented, PepsiCo, for example, and Bimbo, that they are giving results in terms of the points that we addressed in the presentation. But they are like isolated projects, and the feeling that we have when we review all the information is that there is not a structured strategy to connect the dots and find the result.
Just to add to what Alejandro mentioned is that one thing that actually is really critical is that even though there are gender policies, the social cultural mindset is really important to improve the system behavior. So even though we have the policies going around and not with isolated interventions, if we don't switch that pattern, it's really complicated to improve the system behavior.
Also, I would like to add about to what Alejandra mentioned. There are some private intervention measures taking place, but I think there's a gap between the government intervention and, more importantly, the disbursement of resources from government to these private or these not-for-profit organizations. And this broken link, if mended well, it can penetrate more into the rural setup of the Mexican communities and bring in those resources to those communities, and we can see the positive outcome from that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So our last team is Corpus Christi. We'll get you a minute to get set up.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, judges, organizers, educators, and fellow participants. Before we begin, I respectfully acknowledge that Corpus Christi and St. Mark's College is located on the unceded Coast Salish territory, the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, and Katzie nations. Today, we will be presenting on the nursing shortage in British Columbia, which is great because we are in the middle of Nurse Week. So picture yourself aspiring to be a nurse with a steep desire to help others and help people when they are most vulnerable. So you become a nursing student, driven by a fierce passion to become a healthcare hero. But as you graduate and step into the emergency unit, your dreams are shattered by the harsh reality of the situation. You find yourself attending to 8 patients at a time instead of the 3 you anticipated, which forces you to make heart-wrenching decisions about who to prioritize. This is the brutal reality of being a healthcare professional, but more specifically, this is the reality of Jen Fabula, a registered nurse working in the emergency unit in Richmond General Hospital. Beyond the bedside, nurses like Jen and many others we had the privilege of interviewing are working tirelessly to provide quality of care for their patients, and it is our goal to shed light on the healthcare heroes of our world today and look at the inefficiencies that are causing the nursing shortage. My name is Renee Jose, and I'm joined alongside Jessica Sangalang, Samrath Gill, Anthony De Lazari, and Sawyer Drummond. We are fortunate to have this occasion to shine a light on the important work that nurses do. Our team used a systems thinking approach and modeling methodology to identify the various factors contributing to the nursing shortage. We consulted scholarly sources, research reports, and media articles. However, it was the direct interviews that we had with key stakeholders such as healthcare professionals, nursing students, and nurses in emergency units in BC that were the most insightful, as we are not nurses nor directly involved in the healthcare system. Our personal experiences with loved ones also help us to better understand the impact of the shortage on its affected populations.
We begin our analysis by understanding why there is a nationwide shortage of such a crucial part of the healthcare system. Canada is an attractive country to live in. Its economic opportunity, promise of safety, and universal healthcare are a few among the many reasons people come to start new lives here. However, Canada's nursing shortage is being challenged by the double-edged sword of an increased demand for healthcare and an inadequate supply of nurses. As a result of better medical technology and a shift away from physical labor over this last century, people are living longer and relying more on medical treatment to maintain their desired quality of life. Factors such as family doctor shortage, healthcare system underfunding, an increased number of overweight people, and hospital readmissions are also affecting the demand for healthcare. However, the aging population is most significant contributor to the increased demand. The supply of nurses has not kept up with the demand, which has resulted in an increased workload for nurses. Documenting regulations have also increased, adding to their workload, along with the need for continuing education as health issues become more complex and new medical technologies and treatments are developed. With higher workloads, retention rates have fallen. Nurses have been undervalued and underutilized due to gender role stereotypes and disorderly compensation models that underpay them, which leads to decreased retention rates. Burnout, which is caused by the increased workload, has led to hospital understaffing and further decreased retention rates.
Unfortunately, the educational institutions tasked with increasing the number of nurses have not had the necessary funding nor educators to keep up with the demand for nurses. Nursing students face economic realities such as high housing, living, and education costs, as well as inflation, which are not factored into the curriculum which was created 25 years ago. This results that many nursing students have to work to pay for their living circumstances and education while taking a full course load and gaining clinical experience, resulting in being burned out as nursing students before entering the workforce. Internationally educated nurses also face barriers to practicing in Canada, resulting in a domestic brain drain. Each of these issues is highly interrelated, and solutions that only address one seldomly cut to the root of its cause. The visual map highlights the complexities of the nursing shortage and emphasizes a need for comprehensive solutions that address all the issues.
Two major gaps have emerged in the healthcare system and education system as a result of the increased demand for healthcare and inadequate supply of nurses. The complexity experience gap refers to the growing disconnect between the complexity of patient healthcare issues and the experience of nurses. In a profession where stress, pressure, and the need to make good judgments is key, experience is one of the most fundamental tools in a nurse's belt. However, since retention rates are low, the average age of nurses is decreasing.
The theory to practice gap is the result of nurses being trained under the assumption that they will enter into an optimal system with sufficient resources, proper staffing, and manageable workloads. The gap notes the differences between the workplace expected and the workplace reality faced by nurses. This contrast contributes to low retention rates, burnout, and further worsens the complexity experience gap.
Now, there are two major demographics vulnerable to the implications of the nursing shortage. Number one being elderly patients who heavily depend on the healthcare system, however, are now facing longer wait times and a discontinuity of care, increasing the risk of rehospitalization. Additionally, those living in the remote areas of the province, many of which are Indigenous communities, face barriers to healthcare due to inadequate infrastructure, geographic remoteness, low retention rates for nurses, and inadequate Indigenous-specific health resources. As a result, patients must travel longer distances to receive care in urban areas, which can lead to disruptions in their treatment.
Canada has been committed to developing and implementing solutions to address its nursing shortage through organizational, monetary, and structural efforts. Organizational efforts are proving to be effective in reducing workload and increasing the supply of nurses. Labor unions seek to increase workplace conditions and pay while addressing burnout. Additionally, federal initiatives seek to streamline the process for IENs to increase the supply of nurses, and at-home care helps to reduce rehospitalization, which decreases hospital workload. Monetary solutions to the nursing shortage include increased healthcare funding, such as BC funding 600 new nursing seats, and universities introducing a master's program in Indigenous nursing to address racism in the healthcare industry and equip nurses to better support Indigenous health and well-being. These initiatives are good. However, they do not address the theory to practice gap, lack of educators, or low retention rates that translate into a need for more seats in nursing schools. Lastly, structural solutions seek to better utilize nurses. One such solution being implemented with success by Providence Healthcare is team-based care that delivers patient care as a combined effort by multiple healthcare professionals working together.
Nursing shortages and healthcare crises are not limited to British Columbia. The country with the greatest number of nurses per capita is Norway, largely in part to their Competence Lift program, which improves workplace conditions, pay, and other essential competencies to increase retention rates. Here in Canada, privatized healthcare has been proposed as a solution to the healthcare crisis because it has the potential to decrease wait times and give people more access to specialized care. However, it is uncertain if privatizing healthcare would have a positive effect on the nursing shortage, given that the US also has a nursing shortage despite its privatized healthcare system. This is because privatized care may improve efficiency, but may not address the root causes of the nursing shortage, such as low retention rates, workplace conditions, burnout, and a high workload. Furthermore, the universal healthcare system here in Canada is a national point of pride and may affect the desirability of living in Canada.
Our team considers better reorganization and budgeting of healthcare funding to address investment gaps in preventative measures and staff retention strategies for reducing healthcare spending in the long run. Exhausting resources on one effort will only exacerbate the current system's inefficiencies. We must support the current workforce while also increasing the number of nurses.
So our team proposes standardizing nurse residency as a lever of change, thus mandating a 6-month regulatory program for new graduates in hospitals to decrease errors and develop confidence, as the transition from student to nurse is a critical period for intervention to address the theory to practice gap. We also propose regular career mentorship and subsidizing continuing education pathways to increase the supply of experienced nurses, reconciling the complexity experience gap, and maximizing their utilization to meet the evolving standards of care. By offering their best start to their careers and continuous career development, we can retain more nurses rather than simply solely on relying on hiring new ones.
Many nurses are not taught how to take care for themselves. Our team sees the need for a pan-Canadian support program for nurses with emphasis on public health literacy to educate nurses on their rights and the resources available to them. This would implement peer and mental health resources within hospitals themselves, rather than sending nurses to external programs just to get the help they need. Workplace support is also needed to reduce workload and increase efficiency. Upgraded clinical support infrastructure could look to speech-to-text recording devices to streamline administrative and documenting tasks.
Amidst growing publicity, we began this project with our expectations of the nursing shortage heavily influenced by the media. After examining the desperate cycle of staffing shortages, increased workloads, and nurse burnout, we've discovered how multifactorial the healthcare system truly is. Changes to the system, be it in solutions or exacerbating factors, have diverse impacts on all other stakeholders. Our interviews underscored the necessary reciprocity in the system. Solutions must both reduce the workload and increase the supply of nurses. It's difficult to comprehend 70-hour work weeks, yet unfortunately, this is the reality for some nurses, many with families of their own who are not exempt from the socioeconomic realities of the province. Beyond the bedside, the nurses we publicly praise for their dedication must also receive this same support internally from the very system that's dependent on their vitality. From the front lines of patient care to the heart of medical decision-making, nurses are the essential backbones of the healthcare system. Thank you.
Samrath, Renee, Anthony, Jessica, Sawyer, really well done. And you need to take this on the road with the team from University of Calgary. Amazing. So Tim has a question.
Awesome. Thank you for the amazing presentation and happy Nurses Week as well. I really appreciated the highlight on the challenges that rural communities face and Indigenous communities specifically. I wonder if you can expand a little bit more on some of the social determinants of health that nurses face, the mental health struggles, and then the supports that exist for nurses. Or just like any supports that some of the challenges that nurses face sort of outside of their profession. And, you know, I think the COVID-19 pandemic really surfaced a lot of underlying issues for everyone, especially nurses.
I think I can start on this question actually. So we recognize through our research how important nurses are to the healthcare system. And to have our direct interviews, I was able to have interviews with multiple nurses in multiple units in the hospitals and clinical spaces. They were able to tell me about how the COVID-19 pandemic not only was a really big factor in healthcare, but it did not really cause the nursing shortage, it only exacerbated the issue. It was really, the shortage existed prior to all of this happening. So hearing the story about the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the factors that nurses face themselves every day is the nurse to patient ratio being extremely high, the fact that they have to bring their workplace struggles home to their own families to take care of their kids and everyone they need to take care of in their own life. A big thing with COVID-19 as well was the mental health struggles they also faced. So seeing how this nursing shortage really affected so many different people in the healthcare system was really inspiring for all of us, and to see how interrelated the healthcare system is.
Awesome. Thank you. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. So that concludes the student presentations, and thank you for your patience, Corpus Christi, in going till the very end. That's not easy to do. So the judges will now leave for a separate call to deliberate, and we'll be joined here by some amazing systems thinkers for a fireside chat while the judges are away. So this time we invite you, the guests, to select your favorite presentation from today. Please note that hosts, speakers, and judges can see the poll, but it won't allow you to vote. But for the audience members, you can vote. It should work for everyone else. So stand by as we make the poll live. And please note as well, polling is anonymous and you are only able to vote for one team. If you cannot see the submit button, try to scroll down to the very bottom of the polling page. And after you have finished voting, feel free to top up your glass, grab some more snacks, and we'll be back here for the fireside chat. So congratulations to all of the teams. It's not easy to keep all of that information into a 10-minute presentation. You have to jettison so much. So just each and every one of them were amazing and beautifully presented. So thank you for that. We're going to go right into the fireside chat. And we'll be joined by Catherine McGowan, who is my colleague at MRU. Catherine is a Associate Professor of Social Innovation at the Bissett School of Business. She is also a Senior Fellow with the Institute for Community Prosperity. So I'm going to hand things over to Catherine.
Thanks, James. Can everyone see me? Yay. Okay, so at this time, I would like to welcome to the virtual stage George Constantinescu. For each of the past 4 years, while the judges are off in their own virtual room deliberating, we've enjoyed a fireside chat with a remarkable Canadian changemaker, reflecting on systems thinking, higher education, and social impact. And so I'm thrilled to welcome this year's guest, George Constantinescu. So George, feel free to turn on your camera while I go through your impressive bio. George Constantinescu is the Senior Vice President and Chief Transformation Officer with ATCO and the Canadian Utilities Limited. In this role, Mr. Constantinescu is responsible for leading transformation initiatives that enable innovation and growth across the enterprise and advancing new commercial initiatives around the world. Mr. Constantinescu first joined ATCO in 1986 and has held progressively senior positions at ATCO Gas, ATCO Electric, ATCO Power, and ATCO's corporate office. He played a pivotal role in establishing ATCO's international electricity generation operations in Australia, as well as evaluating opportunities both in the United Kingdom and the United States. In 2002, he joined ATCO's corporate office as Senior Manager, Corporate Development, where he was an instrumental team member that successfully led the strategic divestiture of ATCO's retail energy operations. Mr. Constantinescu was appointed Senior Vice President and Chief Transformation Officer in February 2018, after spending 14 years cultivating substantial entrepreneurial experience in the range of diverse industries throughout North America. Mr. Constantinescu graduated from the University of Alberta with a BSc in Electrical Engineering. He is a member of the Board of Directors of the OGEO Limited and Orthoshop Geomatics Limited. So welcome, George. We're so thankful that you were able to give us some time on this Friday.
Well, it's a pleasure, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's an incredibly exciting event, and I'm very privileged to be amongst you. Before I begin, I guess I would like to, on behalf of Nancy Southern, ATCO's Chairman of the Board and CEO, and the rest of my ATCO colleagues, I would like to convey my congratulations to all the teams presenting today. You embody the curiosity, creativity, reasoning, and effort that will underpin our collective aspirational future. So it's great to be here amongst you and to learn from you.
Yeah, I really want to co-sign on everything you said, George. I was really impressed with what we saw today. So with that said, let's jump in and get to know you a little bit better. So George, you have the impressive responsibility of leading ATCO's transformation initiatives. What does your team look for when you think about transformation and innovation? And what about these ideas makes them important right now?
Well, I mean, as concepts, I think it's probably worthwhile spending a little bit of time defining these concepts, because I find that they're used quite frequently in discourse today, but without necessarily the sufficient definition. And I'd say they mean something perhaps distinct to us as a company. The definition that we've adopted for transformation and innovation is really dictated by our sense of self. ATCO, as some of you may know, is a legacy company. We have a strong sense of identity and purpose, and we have very firmly held values. We were created in 1947, so 76 years ago, and we're really a product of a visionary spark by two individuals, and we have come to be who we are through unwavering commitment fueled by tireless entrepreneurial energy. We're a true Alberta success story. Obviously, this is not the work of one or a few. There's been legions that have put in a huge amount of work over the last 7.5 decades to allow us to enjoy the success that we're enjoying today. And we're focused on ensuring that the heritage of success, this legacy of success that we've inherited, is sustainable into an indefinite future. So I would say, really, for us, transformation means incorporating these characteristics that are necessary to allow us to continue to be relevant and continue to be successful in a future that is unpredictable. So that really is how we define transformation. We don't want to change who we are. We want to ensure that we're able to continue to do the good work that we do and serve the people that we do indefinitely into the future. In terms of innovation, we view it as a characteristic. It's an integral part of what we will need to be able to deploy in order to be able to fulfill our transformation mission. So it's something that is going to be innate in everything that we do, as opposed to be a separate task. And that is the approach that we've taken. And the big challenge, of course, is to make that happen. And that is the challenge that I'm very privileged to have taken on.
I think it's so important, though, this idea of, the value embedded in the company of innovating as a way to stay relevant. And I think that actually speaks to a lot of the presentations we saw today, where systems thinking and thinking sort of with an innovative mindset is not some nice to have. It's a need to have if we want to address these big challenges. And that leads me to kind of a question I have as an educator who's always talking about these tools with students. How do you and your team use systems thinking or a systems approach in your work day to day? And are there any examples you can share about how a systems approach helped inform a process or program at ATCO?
Well, we like to think that it applies universally, and so our aspiration is to have it embedded in every process that we undertake. Now, clearly, the amount of contemplation that systems thinking requires, kind of defined by that, isn't appropriate in every sense. There are certain things where procedures that have existed for a long time that may have either very strong foundations or regulatory requirements behind them. They need to be followed. But in most other cases, particularly the kinds of cases that I think we deal with, the ones that are more future looking, a little bit less defined, they can all benefit from systems thinking. And for us, it's probably as simple as understanding that basically every problem that's worth solving right now, everything that hasn't already been solved, has an inherent complexity to it that challenges ready solutions. And starting with that acknowledgement, that understanding that I suppose if it seems that there's a ready answer, chances are you're probably not thinking about it the right way, or you're not asking enough questions, or there's something really important that you're missing, that perhaps you should take some time and reflect. I think that's the most important part of systems thinking. We are mired in complexity, and most of the challenges that we have very foundational trade-offs associated with them. So we need to understand all of that, because at the end of all this exploration, there's usually a very nuanced and difficult question to be answered. And we can't do that unless we're fully informed. And so it's a bit of a cop-out. I didn't give you with a specific example, but I do think that approach lends itself to a whole lot of what we're doing right now, and probably a lot of things that aren't necessarily thought of as strategic. Even some presumptive tactical tasks can lend themselves well to a little bit of reflection and reevaluation.
You know, I'm not going to press you for a specific example, because I think actually that's a really important lesson right there, is the importance of reflection and asking if this hasn't been solved yet, is there a reason? Is there, that kind of questioning, I think, is what differentiates success in this challenge from some students who get stuck, who get stuck on existing solutions or existing assumptions. So I think it's actually just a really important lesson. I want to underline it and celebrate it. Which also then explains why ATCO and Map the System are in a partnership, and that partnership is really growing. Can you tell us why this relationship between Map the System and ATCO appealed to you? And ideally, how do you see this partnership going forward, especially, as you said, being very future looking?
Well, I mean, it came about through a very serendipitous meeting between me and some members of my team and James Stodge. He was hosting us at the Changemaker studio, and it seemed at that time that we were very aligned in our observations and our thinking. And the thing that intrigued me most is that the work that James was doing in the studio was very socially focused, and the work that we were doing necessarily was business focused, was corporately focused. And yet the observations that James and his team were making more broadly on societal issues translated quite directly with the observations that we were making within a smaller, more defined organizational context. And there certainly seemed to be something universal underpinning this coincidence. And it certainly helped that I think James and I get along very well. I think we're very simpatico to one another. We understand and think in, I think, quite similar ways, and complementary ways. I shouldn't say similar, because I'm not sure that that's a good thing, but complementary ways. And we thought that it was really, we could do something special by bringing these two worlds together. And really, it's that I see the biggest opportunity. Generally speaking, problems aren't fully informed until you have canvassed all opinions, particularly the opposing opinions. And the ability to bring such different perspectives to problem solving is really a gift. And I see that as a huge benefit. the self-evident parts of the answer would be that you're preparing the thinkers of tomorrow and the workforce of tomorrow. And definitely we want to avail ourselves of the best and the brightest. And so engagement with you gives us that opportunity. I believe it gives MRU and Map the System in general, gives them a window into corporate life and the imperatives that exist within that context, which are useful as life skills for students graduating. And so we really think that there is a symbiotic relationship there that we can nurture.
How important it is to combine both the time and attention you have in university to do these deep research projects and the understanding and the ability to work in that corporate space. I think that's those two skills together make students far stronger when they leave our space, when they leave the academy. So it's an important point.
And Catherine, I think they're not as separate as it may seem. I mean, corporate life, particularly when you're a legacy company, particularly when you're looking at multi-generational futures, sustainability of every kind is core to it. And I would argue that sustainability in any kind of social system is also core. It needs to be able to sustain itself. Whatever solution may be implemented needs to persist for long enough to actually be beneficial. And so I think we're covering very, very similar ground there. The differences are not as they may first appear. I think there's way more commonality than there is discrepancy.
Well, I mean, it's the point you made, like this is the idea that, you're coming in, seeing these people talk about social issues, and you have business issues, but ultimately the observations are universal and potentially universally applicable. And, additionally too, I think it's important for students to understand that they are building skills. It's not sort of, you don't do a class for a mark and then leave. You have a skill. Speaking of universal observations and different opinions coming together, Map the System participants come from a wide range of disciplines and different points on their educational journey. We heard today we have undergrads all the way to graduate students, yet they share an interest in untangling complex problems and a willingness to do this work outside of the traditional classroom setting. Given your work and what you have shared with us thus far, what do you wish had been part of your own educational journey to prepare you?
Well, I think part of the answer is part of the question. The diversity of view, of thought that the students bring to teams, I think is essential in really understanding problem space, and anything that enhances your ability to look and appreciate things from different perspectives, I think is hugely beneficial. Thinking back on my own background, my own educational journey, I've been very, very lucky in that respect. I mean, it didn't seem so at the time. I'm an immigrant. I came to Canada as a near teen, and I saw an educational system that's quite different from Canada, and then I embraced the Canadian system. I learned a whole bunch of things in that transition, and throughout my educational progress in my career, I've been able to experience things which really formed my worldview, expanded my worldview. And so that's been tremendously beneficial to me. And to the extent that one can enjoy that breadth of experience within the educational system, that's wonderful. And you should seek it out. Take the philosophy course if you're an engineer. It may not seem all that beneficial, but it truly is. You'll appreciate it down the road. But I'd say beyond that, it's the educational system and the time that you spend within formal education is limited, but you have a lifetime opportunity to experience new things and to learn and take full advantage of it. The critical element in allowing that to happen is curiosity. So be very curious about everything around you. it's important to have a certain amount of humility to understand that there are limitations to what you can know and therefore what you do know, and to find the next discovery exciting as opposed to a threat to some kind of an image of yourself as being comprehensively knowledgeable. So those are really the things that I think enrich us and make us better equipped, I guess, to deal with and imagine different futures and deal with challenging realities. And that's what I would encourage people to do.
That's absolutely wonderful. I actually have a 9-month-old in the other room who's screaming at me. So if you don't mind, I'm going to run and grab her, and then I will ask you our last question.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. The judges are back. We're just having trouble getting one more person back in the room. And as soon as we do that, I think we will be able to move on. George, great to see you.
Great to see you, James. Always a pleasure.
Sorry about that. I talk about complexity.
Hello there.
This adds a lot of complexity to our lives. So James, did you want me to continue or?
Well, you know what? I think we can actually wrap up because Ashley is back and the judges are all back. So I think we're good.
Just quickly sort of, I think the point George made at the end there about, humility, but also seeking out opportunities is just so critical. I mean, I didn't necessarily always do it in my own education. And you pay for it later if you don't. It's wonderful to be an expert on one thing, but it's so much more powerful to understand the expertise of many people. And even, I don't think I ever fully experienced that myself until I was in my postdoc. So I want to co-sign on that one. People sort of say, oh, you have to get your this degree by this point, and this degree by that point, and you have to get a GPA of this. And that's true for some programs. But, outside of academia, I've never applied for a job where they asked for my GPA. But if you can demonstrate a breadth of experience and a breadth of the network, then you're much better off. So I have to say, I co-sign on everything George just said. I think it was a really powerful statement. And I think we're speaking to the converted, but I hope that we can reach out and address more people. So thank you so much, George. We really appreciate it.
It's a true pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, all three of you, actually. Bertie, good to see you online. I can't say enough both about the relationship with ATCO and everything that George has described in terms of how authentically they've approached their relationship and how deeply they are thinking about systems mapping and systems thinking and incorporating that into their work is absolutely authentic, and it's a really cool partnership, and look forward to the next few years of that partnership blossoming even further. And Catherine, thank you for stepping in. I know you're under the weather today and doing this on half a tank, but you can, I think for people online, you can get a sense that Catherine is an extraordinary educator, has mentored virtually all of the people that are behind the scenes in this, and all of the students who have gone through Map the System over the last number of years as one of our important mentors, coaches, and educators. Catherine actually runs a course that's aligned with Map the System. So thanks to both of you. So the judges are back and ready to announce the winners. But first up, we're going to go to the Audience Choice Award. And just a reminder, this is a $100 Canada Helps gift card to support the charity of the winning team's choosing. So congratulations to Corpus Christi College for their analysis of the nursing shortage in BC beyond the bedside. Congratulations to Anthony De La Razzi, Renee, Jose, Samarath Gill, Jessica Sandalang, and Sawyer Drummond. So now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, I will hand it over now to one of our judges, Vanessa Sun, to announce the winners from today's competition.
Hi
everyone. Before I announce the 4 winners chosen amongst the judges and I want to first offer my congratulations to all the teams here today. The hard work, tenacity, and passion you have all put into your project shows, and we have all truly learned a lot. Every written submission and presentation were outstanding, and I hope you all are proud of how far you have come, no matter the results. And now, without further ado, what you all have been waiting for, pretty anxiously, I'm sure, the top 4 teams that will represent Canada in the global finals in no particular order are Athabasca University. Congratulations, Karen, for your project on leaks in the pipeline, barriers to student success in the post-secondary system. Congratulations. The next university that will be representing Canada is the University of British Columbia for your project on sexual health education in BC school systems. Congratulations to Raina, Jenna, and Gabriella. Next, the 3rd team representing Canada at the global finals is Corpus Christi College with Beyond the Bedside, the nursing shortage in British Columbia. Congratulations, Anthony, Sawyer, Samrath, Renee, and Jessica. And lastly, the last university to represent Canada at the global finals is University of Calgary with their project on family physician shortage, a Canadian healthcare crisis. Congratulations, Winston, Brandon, and Tina. Congratulations, everyone. Thanks so much, Vanessa. I would just also like to say congratulations to the 4 global finalists. It's super exciting, and we are super excited to have you represent Canada this year. And those universities again are Athabasca University, the University of British Columbia, Corpus Christi College, and the University of Calgary. We wish you well on the next stage of the competition. We will be cheering you on from Canada, and I will be cheering you on in Oxford. I will now hand it back to James for some final words.
Thanks, Ashley. So join us in congratulating again the top 4 Canadian finalists. They're going to present and represent Canada at the Global Map the System final in July at the University of Oxford. And congratulations as well to the Audience Choice Award winners. So finally, I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the amazing Ashley Dion for her outstanding leadership in managing Map the System Canada. There are so many parts to managing a program coast to coast like this. Hopefully it'll be coast to coast to coast soon. As well as to Amy Rintoul, Cordelia Snowden for helping with the logistics this week. Amy and Cordelia have been essential to pulling this off. And you can imagine the advanced prep and logistical complexity of running just this week's series of events, from the coaching sessions to the 3 concurrent semifinal sessions and the student learning day to today's final event in adjudication. And planning for the 2024 edition begins mere weeks from now. So thank you as well to ATCO for making all of this possible. And thank you for joining us and being part of Map the System Canada 2023. Everyone stay safe, have a wonderful weekend, and see you next year.